Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 2025 Council Agenda Briefing. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio and video of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that audio recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests and interests affecting impartiality, and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, we move to item 1, which is the declaration of opening. I declare this meeting open at 1 minute past 6 p.m, and I'm pleased to welcome, on behalf of Council, Mr. Matthew Scott as the Acting Chief Executive Officer. Matthew has been appointed as the Acting Chief Executive Officer pending the appointment and commencement of a new Chief Executive Officer. Tonight is Matthew's first council agenda briefing since commencing at the City of South Perth on the 1st of July 2025, and we very much look forward to working with him. Items for Council. Agenda items 2, 3, 6, 7, 8.1, 8.2, 9, 11, 13 and 14 will be dealt with at the ordinary council meeting to be held on 22 July 2025. That takes us to item 4, which is attendance. Item 4.1 is apologies. I haven't received any apologies for this evening. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence. So Councillor Glenn Cridland has an approved leave of absence for the period of 15 July 2025 to 17 August 2025 inclusive. Councillor Bronwyn Waugh has an approved leave of absence for the period of 7 July 2025 to 23 July 2025 inclusive, but she did want me to say that while she's on a leave of absence tonight, she had intended to attend tonight's agenda briefing meeting. She wishes to advise that her flight is delayed and it is now looking unlikely that she will be back in Perth in time to attend. And Councillor Hayley Prendeville has an approved leave of absence for the period of 10 July 2025 to 21 July 2025 inclusive. Item 4.3 is parental leave. Councillor Nick Coveney has a period of parental leave approved for the period of 4 June 2025 to 4 December 2025 inclusive. Councillor Nick Coveney also wanted me to read something on his behalf. He wishes to advise the following: that he is watching the live stream at home, that he will be in the chamber next Tuesday for the ordinary council meeting, and that he foreshadows an amendment to his motion at item 12.1, that the location where the juvenile trees are to be removed be given the same sort of greening treatment as the Hurlingham Living Stream. That's the message that Councillor Coveney wanted me to read. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Councillor Nick Coveney has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as I have spoken and met with several residents from both sides of this debate, and Councillor Nick Coveney has also declared an impartiality interest in item 12.1 as I have spoken and met with several residents from both sides of this debate. Councillors, does anyone else have any interest that they wish to declare this evening? I'm going to take that as a no. We move on to item 8, which is presentations. Item 8.3 is deputations. And this evening we have 10 speakers who have requested to speak to 15 items in total. So, given the large number of deputations to be presented and to ensure a respectful and efficient meeting, those present who have requested to deputise on more than one item have been asked to limit their deputation to 10 minutes in total. So in other words, make sure that you cover all the items that you want to speak to within the 10-minute period. So I kindly ask that whilst everyone's insights and perspectives are valuable, please do keep the comments concise and to the point, and please try to avoid unnecessary repetition of points already covered by preceding deputations, and this practice follows similar situations at previous meetings. So, to begin, I'd like to invite Mr Warwick Boardman of Salter Point, who is speaking for the officer recommendation at item 10.3.1. Welcome to you, Mr Boardman. We look forward to your deputation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The proposed, I'm talking about the greening strategy, urban greening strategy proposal, and this proposal is, I feel, needed to modernise the city's approach to verge planting and enhancing our city's biodiversity through encouragement of tree retention, planting of trees and other greenery that promote biodiversity, or at least the provision of food for threatened species such as our black cockatoos on private property and on road verges. It's also about combating heat islands and making life in the city more pleasant and enjoyable, as opposed to a stark concrete jungle, which it could become. It could make active transport more enjoyable and hence more used as a way of getting around, and possibly by doing so, increase a sense of community. Certainly as a cyclist, I think a bit of greenery certainly helps the journey. The proposed strategy puts retaining what we've already got as a priority, such as our bushlands and so on, and our foreshores, but expects that this can be improved on. It embodies strategies that make use of infrastructure projects for enhancing life on land, for example, using rainwater rather than draining it away, or all of it away anyway. Indeed, green infrastructure can be more resilient and require less costly maintenance than hard infrastructure. And there's examples of that perhaps on the foreshore beaches where we don't have walls anymore. Some who have not much experience of nature may not appreciate what this strategy seeks to do. Within the strategy itself is a role for increasing the exposure of our citizens to nature, and hence their appreciation of what the strategy seeks to do. In this way, all investment will be good for years to come, rather than being undone in the future by a council that does not respect the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Just before you get up, I'll ask the councillors present if anyone has any questions for you about your deputation. Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Boardman, for your deputation. With regard to the planting of additional food source for the black cockatoos,
yes.
Are there any areas in particular around the city that you would identify as suitable for increasing, I suppose, the food source? And I'm talking maybe things like jarrah trees, marri trees, larger trees, and not only for the whitetails but also for the redtails. So have you got any ideas of locations that you find are maybe a bit deficient or we should maybe consider?
I know that the city's already considering Kent Street as an area for planting good food source trees. And the problem with putting trees on road verges is that the cockatoos can get hit by cars and trucks. So you've got to have them a decent distance from the verge. So not all verges are necessarily good for cockatoo plantings, but also the city has planted non-locals, I think they're some sort of nut trees, I forget what they are, macadamias, thanks, in the George Burnett precinct. So, you know, while it doesn't necessarily promote biodiversity of local species, at least it helps the cockatoos along, yeah. So I guess the city's doing what it can in its own property, but of course what private people could do is plant such trees that, you know, cockatoos can feed on. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Any further questions, councillors? No. Thank you very much for your deputation. I'd now like to invite Ms Kay Poe of Como, who is speaking for the officer recommendation at item 10.3.1 and speaking against the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome to you, Ms Poe, and we look forward to your deputation.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening. On behalf of Friends of Collier Reserve, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that while the draft Urban Greening Strategy, UGS, doesn't yet fully meet our expectations as it lacks clear goals, measurable targets, and defined priority areas, we still recognise its value as an important overarching framework for creating a greener and healthier city of South Perth. It is our view, however, that for the strategy to have real impact, it should be supported by an implementation plan with clear, time-bound key performance indicators and milestones. While we understand the city may be cautious about setting targets, these would provide a transparent way to track progress and foster ongoing collaboration with the community. For this reason, we support adopting the strategy, provided the implementation plan includes these elements and allows for meaningful public input. The draft strategy outlines a long-term vision focused on increasing canopy cover, connecting green corridors, and improving livability to address climate and urban pressures. Importantly, it was shaped by extensive community engagement and reflects a shared understanding across the district that urban greening is vital public infrastructure for well-being, biodiversity, and climate resilience. Built around 4 actionable pillars, protect, enhance, manage, and connect and support, the strategy offers a scalable framework adaptable to the unique needs of different areas and neighbourhoods. It also encourages collaboration with community groups like Friends of Collier Reserve, whose vision to protect and revitalise the reserve and its surrounds as an inclusive green space for community, sport, and environmental conservation aligns closely with the city's goals to protect and enhance local environments. To illustrate this, I'd like to explain how each pillar can support the aspirations of the Collier Reserve community. The first pillar, protect, aligns with our priority to safeguard Collier Reserve from exclusive use or redevelopment that limits access, reduces canopy, or harms the ecosystem. Having seen these risks firsthand with the WASP hockey proposal, we know the reserve remains vulnerable to future threats. This pillar offers a citywide framework to keep precious green spaces open, inclusive, and environmentally sustainable for all, not just a privileged few. Protect also prioritizes biodiversity conservation and the preservation of green corridors and wildlife habitats across the city, which inherently includes the ecologically significant Collier area. As a vital roosting and foraging site for the endangered black cockatoo, the strategy can strengthen and amplify community efforts to secure their long-term survival and prevent extinction. The second pillar, enhance, aligns with our mission to improve usability and community value at Collier Reserve. As a highly utilised year-round hub for sport, recreation, and community connection, the reserve serves diverse groups, including clubs, schools, and residents. However, during summer, the green space can become extremely hot, posing health risks, especially for the young and old. I've observed mothers with young children, sometimes with prams, confined to sitting along the fence line, where there is little to no shade, while watching their children play junior cricket in full sun. Expanding the tree canopy and adding shaded areas around the oval's perimeter would significantly improve comfort and accessibility for players, spectators, and other users. We've seen the positive impact this can have through the city's excellent work at Bill Graydon Oval, where 240 Western Australian native trees were planted along the perimeter. This is a great example of how thoughtful vegetation management can enhance biodiversity, create natural shade, and make public spaces more welcoming and sustainable. Now imagine applying that same approach at Collier Reserve, linking it with Collins Oval, Bill Graydon Oval, and Ryrie Reserve to create a connected nature trail. transforming individual spaces into a biodiverse green corridor for humans and wildlife. This kind of place-based, community-driven vision can be supported and nurtured through the strategy's final two pillars, manage and connect and support, which fosters local stewardship, collaboration, and care that reflect each area's unique environmental and social value. The goals we pursue as a group, championing urban canopy, connected ecosystems, and inclusive green spaces, mirror the aspirations of many across the city of South Perth. The UGS translates these shared values into a roadmap that can be further refined through the implementation plan to guide policy, investment, and design. Without a clear strategic framework in place, tree planting risks becoming piecemeal, reactive, and vulnerable to short-term political pressure. Councillor Coveney's Notice of Motion 12.1, which seeks to remove 6 newly planted trees at Lake Douglas, is a clear example of such ad hoc decision-making. It runs counter to the intent and guiding principles of the draft UGS, which has been shaped by community aspirations. For these reasons, we oppose this motion on 3 key grounds. 1. The trees were strategically chosen and placed to balance environmental benefits and aesthetics. Claims that these trees will block views are unfounded and ignore professional planning that carefully balance beauty and ecology. 2. Lake Douglas is public land, managed for the whole community, not a private backyard. Its inclusion in the city's Strategic Node 7 plan highlights its role in ecological restoration and future recreation. The argument that the area offers no amenity is baseless and subjective, overlooking the essential benefits trees provide, such as shade, wildlife habitat, water management, and community value. Public spaces should serve the needs of all, not just the preferences of a select privileged few. 3. Allowing tree removal due to pressure from a small group sets a dangerous precedent, undermining council's ability to resist future demands, especially from developers who may seek to clear public greenery for views and profits. Strong leadership means standing firm against such pressures and putting long-term community and environmental priorities above personal commitments. Campaign promises should not be used as justification to override broader community interests. Perhaps what's most disappointing and deeply concerning about this motion is a pattern it reveals, that the interests of a privileged few are repeatedly placed above those of the wider community. As you may recall, Councillor Coveney previously supported the WASP proposal, which involved the exclusive use of a large portion of Collie Reserve by a private hockey club and its elite private school partner. He dismissed opposition as coming from just a few residents living opposite the park. This assertion was, of course, inaccurate, given there were 359 verified signatures from South Perth electors opposing the plan. Now, in striking irony and a clear double standard, Councillor Coveney has submitted this motion at the request of just over a dozen residents living opposite Lake Douglas, all seeking to remove trees to protect their private million-dollar views. The UGS is not an optional extra. It's a necessary response to escalating challenges like rising urban heat, biodiversity loss, and a shrinking canopy caused by infill development, pests, aging vegetation, and climate stress. Motion 12.1 stands in stark opposition and threatens to undermine not only this community-driven vision, but also the integrity of the
60 seconds left, Ms. Poe.
environmental commitments. Councillors now face a clear choice. Will you lead the way as part of the solution or stand in the way and remain part of the problem? We strongly urge Council to reject Motion 12.1 and adopt the urban greening strategy with this expectation that critical details such as targets, timelines, and priority areas will be addressed in an implementation plan developed through a transparent and consultative process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation, Ms. Poe. Councillors, any questions for Ms. Poe this evening? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Poe, for your deputation. With regard to Councillor Coveney's notice of motion 12.1, there has been an amendment which has come through late, and are you privy to the changes to the motion at all?
No, actually, can you explain what the amendment is?
Yeah, certainly. So the original notice of motion as it stood was purely to remove the 6 trees. The amendment is to still remove the 6 juvenile trees, but to also include the planting of approximately 135 square metres of low-level planting in that vicinity on the south side of Lake Douglas. So that's the second part. And the third part is to include an adjustment for an additional $30,000 worth of expenditure through the mid-year review process to cover the costs with regard to the removal and the preparation of the trees. So effectively, it's an additional 135 square metres of low-level vegetation. I was just wondering, I know you haven't received this information early and it's only new to you right now, but what are your thoughts with regard to this, and is that acceptable, you know, in the place of losing 6 trees?
Well, I think we have to place a certain level of trust with the city in terms of their planning. And I think for any councillor to come on board and suggest removing this or shifting it there or planting this instead would undermine those efforts. And it sets a dangerous precedent. That's what I think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Poe. Any further questions, councillors? No. Thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Ms Bronwyn David of South Perth, who is speaking against the officer recommendation at item 10.3.1 and speaking against the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome to you, Ms David. I look forward to your deputation.
Thank you very much. I've got my phone here so I can time myself, so I will try not to go over time and try your patience. 10.3.1, the greening strategy. I'm not terribly impressed with it, I have to say. I acknowledge that the city has gone to an awful lot of effort and employed some different strategies to take the will of the people. And I just, I mourn that so much time, effort and money has gone into it for an outcome which is really nothing special. If you just written green is good, it would probably encompass much of what is said in the strategy. The report which accompanied the strategy shows a lot of maps and graphs and outcomes of surveys, and these are great and really interesting, but I just fear they haven't been incorporated into the final strategy. For example, in the maps, we see that there are some areas which are green deserts within our municipality, especially in the Como ward. And yet in the strategy, there's nothing to actually address, trying to get people who live there more green areas. Similarly, and this is going to intersect with my comments on agenda item 12.1, there's results of a survey asking people, when it comes to views or trees, which side they come down on, and the vast majority of people, 2/3, indicate that they're more in favour of trees than they are of views. And yet again, there's nothing in the strategy about that. And as we can see from tonight, it's a live issue, and you would hope that there might be something in the strategy that would guide the council into the future when these matters come up. Another aspect that came out of the deliberations was from the community consultation, where we a list of 15 priorities were identified, and the top half of that number were given the most priority. But once again, I can't find a lot of links between what that community consultation panel found was most important and what ended up in the strategy. For example, the number one item on that list is to prioritise funding for urban greening, given the social, health and environmental benefits. Well, when it comes to funding, within the strategy itself, under the heading What We Considered, funding approach, it says to prioritise initiatives from urban greening implementation plan will be considered for funding. It's like, well, the community consultation wanted it prioritised, and yet the strategy says will be considered. Those two aren't meshing for me. Similarly, the community consultation group wanted to maximise community involvement, especially through education. Under the Connect and Support pillar, education is number 6 out of 8 strategic priorities. Now, it's probable that the order of the strategic priorities is neither here nor there. There's just a whole lot of strategic priorities, but for the community consultation panel to put it at number 2 and then it to end up way down on a list just illustrates to me that there hasn't been a lot of thought given to what the community was actually saying when it came to putting together the strategy. So I would hope that Council might consider that we actually need more in the strategy, or at the very least, as a previous speaker has said, that when it comes to the implementation, that we actually get something more solid and concrete that we can hang on to. And I see I'm halfway through my time, so I'm going to move to Councillor Cavani's notice of motion regarding the removal of 6 trees planted on the south side of Lake Douglas. As you can probably appreciate, knowing me, I don't like this idea, but you hear frequently from me what my attitude is, and instead I'd like to share with you, to bring some fresh perspectives to the Council, I put this out to the court of public opinion, which is otherwise known as Facebook community pages, and just put up Councillor Cavani's motion and said, what do you think? And these are some of the responses. Pathetic. OMG. Trees, please. Even without the objectively measurable benefits, the appeal is so obvious anytime you drive through a suburb with lots of trees. It's so disheartening. Trees all the way. Really? The original landscape was covered with vegetation of a diverse range of wetlands plants. Buildings didn't exist. What have we done? Aren't more trees necessary and beneficial to our environment? It's sad to think some people value views from their little spot over the beautification of our natural green spaces. Think we need more trees. Blocking the view should not be a consideration. As others have commented, they don't mind allowing buildings that overshadow existing homes and take all their light and privacy away. I fear that person's got other issues. So much for greening the city. I think we need more trees. Blocking the view should not be a consideration. Sadly, it appears some councillors are persuaded to sacrifice the well-being of the environment and the majority of people to accommodate the special few. Sadly, their altruism is not extended to banning inappropriate developments. It's bad enough that we're losing them due to pests like the shot-hole borer without intentionally removing perfectly healthy ones for no good reason. I'm appalled that some South Perth councillors are considering removing 6 healthy trees because of a handful of residents think trees spoil their view. These trees are the view. Views and ownership, or the right to have views, has been extensively tested within the planning instrument through SAT. Almost every case has established that views are not by right or can result in them being built out. I don't think this would change when considering tree canopy, biodiversity and urban ecology goals also contained in the planning instrument. People who sit in their homes looking out to their perceived ownership of their view will never appreciate the feel of shade on their shoulders as they walk, as they are too busy being self-centred. You only own land or air in your boundary, not the air or view above someone else's property, including parkland. Stop pandering to those few and look after those who love the environment. These trees could grow and provide beautiful shade to picnicking families, habitat for birds and animals, and help reduce the temperature in the heat of summer. The pros for the community far outweigh the brief moments in the day that a particular resident stops to look at that building in the distance. Removing healthy trees because a few want an unobstructed skyline, these trees are truly priceless for shade, habitat and public and ecosystem well-being. Leave them be. This will also open others to object to trees if their views are affected. A handful of people who want views across public land should not have any capacity to destroy community infrastructure such as trees. This motion by a councillor is outrageous and shows that money talks louder than whole of community values. If we don't have trees, we don't have life. Not far to walk or drive to see view, and I reckon if you stop looking at it after a while, accept that
60 seconds remaining, Ms David.
and keep the trees or go and live somewhere else. So, as you can see, a large number of people who wouldn't necessarily be motivated to write to their local councillor or call you or come along tonight and speak to you have a lot to say about this issue, and they're not very happy about the idea. And I do hope that you take that into account. In an environment where so many councils are actually pushing for greater canopy in the area through passing tree protection policies. In fact, the town of Victoria Park is deliberating on it tonight. I just fear that this is such a retrograde step and opens the council to being made a laughingstock. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation, Ms David. Councillors, any questions for Ms David this evening? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms David, for your deputation. My question is going to be similar to the question I asked Ms Pope. So again, it's with regard to an amendment to Councillor Nick Coveney's item 12.1. It includes the removal of 6 trees, the planting of approximately 135 square metres of low-level planting, and also an additional $30,000 to cover the removal of the trees and also the planting of the trees. In addition to that, I think we heard the Mayor mentioned with regard to Councillor Coveney not being here tonight, that I think the wording was the treatment to be similar to the Hurlingham living stream, what that may look like for that south side of Douglas, Lake Douglas, I'm not too sure. But did you have any comments with regard to the proposed amendments that are not before us tonight?
It's quite difficult, as you can appreciate, to having only been made aware of the proposed change tonight. But as I understand it, it still involves the removal of these trees. I see no issue with removing the grass monoculture and introducing a greater variety of species, which I think the councillor might be getting at. My only concern is that there might be an ulterior motive here, which is that grass is an inviting surface that people can walk on, play on, picnic on, whereas naturalising the environment, perhaps with bushes and reeds, and making it not such a flat area, means that there won't be much use of that area by people, and whether this is has been put up by a resident to actually keep people away from traversing the open ground in front of their house, I'm not sure.
Thank you, Ms David.
Can I also ask answer the question about where I would suggest planting trees for black cockatoos?
Yes, you certainly can.
I think we've got a lot of space along the foreshore and there's not many roads along there, so it would be a very safe space for trees for cockatoo feed to go.
Thank you, Ms David.
Any further questions, councillors? No. Thank you for the deputation, Ms David. I'd now like to invite Dr Sue Gilliatt of Salter Point, who is speaking for the officer recommendation at item 10.3.1. Welcome to you, Dr Gilliatt, and we look forward to your deputation.
Good evening, Mayor Milner and councillors and the new CEO and also city officers. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I speak for the Salter Point Community Group, which wishes to support the city's recommendation that the council adopt the urban greening strategy. We'd like to explain our support a little and make some observations about council governance on the matter. Firstly, our support for the strategy. For us, it speaks to a major shift in community sentiment about the importance of greening, including canopy. In our view, the strategy broadens our thinking about the nature of greening, makes what we all already have in place a priority, and provides opportunities to improve what we all do as we grapple with climate change. In Salter Point and Manning alone, we have at least 5 active greening bush care groups: Friends of Goss Avenue, the Aquinas College Mount Henry Peninsula Group, Friends of Hope Avenue Reserve, the Manning Bushland and the Davilac Crescent Bushland. This proposed urban greening strategy, through its very existence, will acknowledge and foster the valuable and significant contributions that these and other community groups make to the livability of our city. Just as important has been the extensive stakeholder engagement which has got the strategy to this point, a strategy which has been over 2 years in the making. This has involved a significant investment of ratepayer goodwill and time, as well as city officer effort and city expenditure. Members of the deliberative panel gave 2 to 3 full days of their time and were committed to this approach. From our perspective, this level of engagement needs to be respected, and should councillors take issue with the strategy at this end stage, sidestepping this significant piece of community engagement could be perceived as disingenuous. On a cautionary note, we feel the strategy could go further. We're surprised it has no targets, nor any local contextual detail about the current situations in wards and neighbourhoods. As an aside, when the draft local planning tree retention policy was voted down by this council last year, we were all left with an ongoing dependency on this city to plant the majority of new trees. That's a problem. Such a reliance can easily go awry, and sometimes does, if trees are inappropriately placed and unsuitable tree types are used. Blanket tree planting doesn't work. We've had our own episode and upset on our Salter Point foreshore when 5 eucalypts appeared unexpectedly and overnight. Consultation and respect are key to implementing residents' wishes rather than imposing tree quotas unilaterally. Now on to some general observations about council governance on the matter. Having listened to audio recordings of most council meetings in the last 12 months, I'm keen, we can see a pattern developing of councillors coming in with 11th hour changes to officer recommendations. These are city officer recommendations which appear have been informed by significant expert consultant input and have often involved comprehensive engagement with the community. We find this last-minute effort disturbing. In our view, these walkbacks seem to be occurring across a range of portfolios. For example, the draft local planning tree retention policy, last minute, the leasing of Collier Reserve to WASPs, and the draft local heritage survey. Again, last-minute interventions by councillors which feel disruptive. They can also be perceived as dismissive of ratepayers and wasteful of city resources. Looking on from out here in the burbs, A pattern of delayed inputs like this reflects poorly on the functioning of council. Only speaking up after the entire process is all but complete is not good governance. It does not inspire confidence that we're getting sound representation or indeed collaboration and cooperation with city officers and the community. These last-minute changes come with risk. One of the biggest risks is that battles fought out in public relying on half of council's votes suggest disunity between elected members and between council and the administration. Unfortunately, the urban greening strategy appears to provide a further example of this. Councillor Nick Coveney's motion 12.1 to remove 6 trees is of interest. We are not passing judgment on the future of the 6 trees. We know trees and views are a polarising issue, and we have our own issues on the Salter Point foreshore. However, the fact that these 6 trees, planted last year in winter, are now the subject of a motion before council suggests some kind of failure. The fate of these 6 trees is not a council matter. And a review to identify the reasons why this matter has made its way onto the agenda this evening would be helpful. Dealing with matters such as these behind the scenes, irrespective of the outcome, has the potential to save the community angst in the future for those who value their views and for those who value trees. In the background of motion 12.1, the councillor also takes the opportunity to present his personal view about what appropriate greening could look like. In our view, this may be construed as late to the table, or perhaps as indifferent to the extensive stakeholder engagement which has already taken place. During this engagement, there were numerous opportunities for councillors to participate alongside community members. Such participation could have had the potential to offer an understanding of the views of the community more broadly and the purpose of the strategy. In closing, we ask councillors to adopt the urban greening strategy without further delay. The strategy provides the council and city administration with the opportunity to confirm to the community its commitment to protecting, maintaining and improving the livability of the City of South Perth. Continued community consultation will be paramount, as will bracketing local areas so that they can be dealt with separately rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. And on the matter of good governance, we encourage councillors to understand their constituents' concerns early and engage collaboratively with city officers and consultants prior to draft proposals being put forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation, Dr Gilliatt. Councillors, any questions for Dr Gilliatt this evening? No.
Andre?
Thank you very much for the deputation.
Feeling left out?
Okay, I'd now like to invite Ms Heidi Schmidt of South Perth, who is speaking for the officer recommendation at item 10.3.1 and speaking against the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome to you, Ms Schmidt, and we look forward to your deputation.
Good evening. The adoption of the urban greening strategy. I speak as a member of the City's Urban Greening Strategy Deliberative Panel, and on behalf of others unable to be here tonight, lucky them, they're overseas, regarding the adoption of the draft strategy. I'm an active member of several community groups and have spoken with numerous community members about the draft UGS. I've had a bad cold, I'm sorry. Our South Perth community was energised by the promise of a long-awaited strategy that could meaningfully respond to environmental challenges. We anticipated a strong, measurable plan, one that would advance canopy growth, expand green space, expand wildlife corridors, and enhance the livability of all 7 suburbs. South Perth needs a forward-focused strategy built on current data, tree canopy coverage, urban heat mapping, shade quality, and wildlife corridors. They're essential to well-being biodiversity and climate resilience. Understandably, the city may not be keen to include quantifiable outcomes, but they are crucial. Without clear measurable targets, we can't track progress or adjust when outcomes fall short. The UGS framework 1, 2, 3 and 4 that another community member went through is very promising. However, despite considerable effort from city officers, the deliberative panel as well, the draft strategy falls short in some key areas. It lacks measurable targets, defined actions and accountability. It doesn't reflect South Perth's specific environmental context, it's rather beige. It overlooks clear public feedback from the consultation, and it excludes local data, prioritisation and progress tracking mechanisms. Since 2016, our canopy cover has been stuck at 16%. It's embarrassing. We used to be a legitimate leafy suburb. This is far below the 30% recommended for healthy, resilient urban environments. Yet this gap is neither recognised in the draft nor addressed. The heat mapping provided uses autumn data, not summer urban heat data. And we all know summers here are killers. While revising the draft UGS may not be feasible given the time and resources already invested, the implementation plan must address these gaps. And critically, the implementation plan must be open to public input. To be effective, the implementation plan must clearly detail targets, timelines, accountabilities, including measurable outcomes. It must prioritise canopy gaps, biodiversity corridors and mapped urban hotspots, up-to-the-minute data in the heat of summer, please. Provisions and protection for endangered species like the carnabees and other black cockatoos, including increasing and protecting critical food sources identified by the experts, such as Pinus pinnata and roosting sites. Strategies to address pests, shot hole borer, climate stress, ageing trees, including consequences and penalties for vandalism. Education and engagement initiatives, as advised by the deliberative panel, are entirely missing. To honour the hard work of both city officers and community contributors, the adoption of the UGS is supported on the condition that the implementation plan is thorough, transparent and is driven by measurable outcomes and meaningful public engagement. I'm also speaking to the removal of the 6 trees. I'm not au fait with the changes that have taken place. Our South Perth overarching and shared environmental outcomes to benefit the greater community must come before the desire of a few individuals to have trees removed to enhance a private view across public land. In this particular case, there are already trees in the line of sight of these properties, as demonstrated by the city's thorough photographs provided. And the trees planted last year will grow no higher than those mature trees already there. Trees aren't just nice to have, they're vital as to how a community functions and thrives. Trees are not dispensable and are crucial to our environment, our health and well-being. Trees lower temperatures by approximately 8 degrees, clean the air, absorb thousands of litres of stormwater and store carbon to fight climate change. The work of 37 representative members of our community as the UGS deliberative panel worked to develop the city's urban greening strategy. This process clearly established that the vast majority of the community wants more trees, not less. A view over public land from a private property is purely personal and passive. A view may be pleasant, but it does not offer environmental or community value. International research has irrefutably proven that trees improve mental well-being for everyone. Trees activate, favourite word of Councillor Coveney, and enliven outdoor places. They also provide habitat for birds, countless other wildlife and pollinators. Other councils are enthusiastically working hard to retain and protect trees and increase canopy cover for the greater good of the whole community, and so should ours. Not pander to the self-interested demands of a handful of residents through motions such as this. When trees are removed purely to enhance someone's view, we all lose benefits that support entire neighbourhoods and the community at large. This motion beggars belief, as it is blatantly contrary to international best practice and clearly not aligned with the wishes of the Greater South Perth community. Letting private interests outweigh public good sends the wrong message. It utters that individual preference matters more than shared sustainability for the entire community. This issue is about balancing voices so that matters that affect everyone benefit everyone. Trees enhance public spaces, encourage and activate, there's that word again, outdoor activity and foster community engagement. Trees are a universal cornerstone of both sustainable urban planning and climate resilience. Protecting trees means protecting everyone's future, not just for today, but for future generations. We ask all of our councillors to act with fairness and responsibility for our whole community by demonstrating their inherent accountability to ensure decisions are not dominated by a select few and by not voting in favour of this motion. A beautiful view may be nice, but a healthy environment is essential. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation, Ms Schmidt. Councillors, any questions for Ms Schmidt this evening? Nope. Thank you very much.
May I ask one question about the $30,000 and the stream thing? Because I didn't understand it.
Next week, definitely, because we have public questions
Okay.
then. I just got to treat everyone fairly, that's all.
Okay.
All right. I'd now like to invite Ms Kathy Lees of South Perth, who is speaking against the officer recommendation at item 10.3.1 and speaking against the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome to you, Ms Lees. We look forward to your deputation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to have to rush this because I was told today that I can only speak for 10 minutes on 2 items, so I'll do my best. I am speaking now on agenda item 10.3.1 against the officer recommendation to adopt the urban greening strategy. I am here to express my disappointment with the draft strategy and the city's reporting in response to the community consultation and urge you to defer for further reporting, review and improvements. The urban greening strategy, if done well, should be a key strategic council document that provides clear direction for creating a resilient, healthy, livable city. The need for this direction in the strategy is more critical now than ever as we face the growing challenges of climate change and increasing population, and with urban greening under more threat than ever from heat, lack of rain, pests and diseases and development pressure. We have seen important greening issues become before the council, for the city and the council over recent times, with ad hoc responses due to the lack of clear strategic guidance at present. They include the rejection of the local planning policy for retention of trees on private property despite majority community support, the notice of motion to halt the planting of 590 new street trees for which the city received state government funding last year, the Wasps Hockey Club proposal for privatisation of a large chunk of Collier Reserve, which was thankfully rejected, the refusal of the admin to take action to remove illegal artificial turf from street verges when reported, the city's recommendation to the WAPC for approval of clearing and installation of a telecommunications tower on the Goss Avenue Reserve, which is an ecologically significant threatened area, the city's approval of removal of more trees at Royal Perth Golf Club over the last couple of weeks, and now the notice of motion on this agenda to remove trees at Lake Douglas. Surely the greening strategy is the document to provide clear direction for decision makers on matters like this that come up over and over again. But unfortunately, the draft strategy fails to do this. It is a generic document that lacks local context and could apply to any local government area. It paves the way for business as usual. It lacks a vision, analysis, direction and ambition for the future, and it does not, for me, certainly convey a sense of priority or urgency. The strategy lacks spatial and local context of the current situation in our neighbourhoods, whereas the analysis to show what we have, what has been achieved to date and where the gaps are. What the strategy does show is that the city's canopy cover has flatlined between 16 and 17% since 2016. We've been told by the council in the past that the city should focus its attempts to expand canopy cover on public land rather than private land. But despite extensive planting and growth of trees in public parks, there has been no notable growth in our canopy cover. And the strategy shows no urgency or clear direction to address this static canopy cover. There is a lengthy list of matters that there is no clear direction or ambition on in the strategy that I've already provided or has already been provided to you and is provided in stage 3 community feedback, but I'm now not provided with the time to talk about this here. However, I hope you will look at this separately. But what is also extremely disappointing to me is the failure of the city to adequately report and respond to community feedback. The officer report goes into much detail on the community consultation methodology undertaken as part of the strategy development, 3 pages worth in fact. Yet the results of the feedback are not provided in the report. Only a dot point list of 6 changes made to the document, including just formatting updates. There is no summary of the comments of over 150 submitters who took the time to provide feedback. No explanation of which concerns expressed in the feedback the city felt were valid or not, and why, and which changes were made in response to the strategy. To find more detail, you have to scroll through the agenda attachments, including more than 15 pages of submitters' stage 3 comments in teeny tiny font. There is a very high-level summary of responses to questions 5 and 6 in the attachments only, but I believe this is a misrepresentation of the many concerns expressed. There is no summary of responses to questions 1 to 4. I did a quick review of the responses to question 5, which asked for general comments on the strategy, and at least 40 submissions said the strategy lacked a clear vision, direction, ambition, and sense of urgency. At least 30 submissions said the strategy needed measurable targets. A similar number talked about the needs for a detailed implementation framework with public consultation. These are just some of the feedback that has been ignored. The community really value our urban greening. As we all know, it is one of the key reasons why people choose to live in the city. I hope you as community representatives recognise this. I hope you as elected community representatives care enough to defer the urban greening strategy to ensure it is revised to not just a tick-a-box business as usual generic document, but a document that reflects and responds to critical challenges and community consultation and shows ambition and clear direction. On item 12.1, so the proposal by Councillor Nick Coveney to remove the 6 trees planted on near Lake Douglas, as indicated by Councillor Coveney in his motion, this is a very polarising issue that comes up regularly. Councillor Coveney has indicated that the reason he has raised the motion is because he has been contacted by over a dozen Jubilee Street residents who are concerned about losing their $1 million views of the Perth CBD skyline as a result of the 6 trees planted. And I'm not sure how many households those dozen residents equate to. It certainly would, well, I'm assuming it's less than a dozen houses. As per Councillor Coveney's motion, he is correct in saying that nobody owns a view. This is well established under WA's planning law. Paying millions of dollars for a house on the basis of a view of the Perth skyline over public land and expecting that view to remain unchanged indefinitely is flawed and misguided. The South Perth Foreshore is a regional parks and recreation reserve for the benefit and enjoyment of the South Perth community and the wider WA community. It belongs to the South Perth community and the wider WA community. It and the views it offers do not belong to the adjoining landowners, and any assumption otherwise indicates a lack of due diligence by the landowners. The officer report explains the trees in question were planted for the benefit of the community, the environment and our wildlife in accordance with the Council's adopted South Perth Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan. As indicated earlier, we have flatlining canopy cover in the City of South Perth, despite major tree planting in public spaces over recent years. We have a rapidly changing and warming climate. We have shot hole borer and no doubt more pests and diseases to come. We have lost numerous trees on the South Perth foreshore to shot hole borer in the last few years, and no doubt we will lose more. I understand that most recently more than 50 paperbark trees at Sir James Mitchell Park have been identified as affected.
60 seconds remaining, Ms Lees.
Sure. And many, if not all, may have been removed. It's reasonable to assume this will continue, and Lake Douglas will also have the same problem, and the view there will change over time, despite residents' concerns, and new planting will become more critical. The notice of motion seeks to ignore all of this, remove healthy trees to appease a handful of residents. It creates a very troubling precedent that undermines the need to protect and expand our existing canopy and the administration planting efforts. In any case, from the images provided by Councillor Coveney as an annexure, the impact of the residents' views is minor. It seems that the concern relates to the possible loss of view of one building in particular. Surely the house's value will not be dramatically impacted by the loss of the view of this building. Importantly, are the wider community rights to be ignored for the sake of a view of a building?
I'm sorry, Ms Lees, that is time. I've got to be fair to everyone. Thank you for the deputation. Councillors, do we have any questions for Ms Lees? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for your deputation, Ms Lees. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is with regard to canopy cover. So the South Perth Tree Canopy Advocates have got some good information with regard to canopy cover and quite a bit of data. And you did note that it's sort of been flatlined for almost the last decade at around about 16 to 17%.
Yes.
So can you provide a little bit more information around the canopy cover, and also with regard to the accessibility and the quality of that information with regard to the 16 or 17% that's been indicated?
What sort of...
Yeah, so I'm just wondering how readily accessible is that data to be updated, and also has it been updated recently as opposed to 2016? So has there been any change at all, or can we identify areas where we've had an increase in canopy cover but a decrease in canopy cover? So maybe it's over private properties we could have lost more canopy and increases in some of the public spaces. Do you have any information, even just generally with regard to the canopy cover?
So in the draft strategy, there were figures provided buried in the appendix, but they've now been moved further up. So they're shown earlier in the strategy. Those figures, my understanding, came from the Urban Tree Canopy Dashboard that the state government delivers. I've looked on the Urban Tree Canopy Dashboard and that they align with those. The latest figures were only just released recently by the state government. They missed 2022, but I also understand that the city has been doing their own measurement or getting consultants in to measure canopy data. So I think that's consistent with the data that they've received largely. Yes, it's flatlining despite a large amount of planning that's been done in our public spaces. I would say that the majority of that is because of the tree canopy that's being lost on private land, and we know that that is a big issue. 85% of tree canopy lost across Perth metro area is lost from private land. And we hear the chainsaws going regularly. We know it's happening in the city of South Perth. There is no requirement to retain trees at the moment because the council rejected the LPP. So we're not going to get ahead on that, in my view, until we start protecting trees on private property and look to retain the large mature trees that we do have, particularly as shot hole borer now and other pests and diseases are going to continue to arise. The other thing I would say is there is a great deal of urgency with this, and especially with the urban greening strategy in terms of planting, because the hotter and drier it gets, the less success rate you're going to get when you are planting new trees. So that's a critical issue, and that's why I think the strategy needs to show a greater level of priority, urgency and direction, clear direction.
Thank you, Ms Lees. Just a follow-up question. So you've noted that the city are obviously working on the modelling of the urban heat mapping as well, and tree canopy cover. So have you had access to that information as the South Perth Tree Canopy advocates been able to?
Well, I've only seen the mapping that the city has had undertaken. And like Heidi said, the mapping that's in the urban greening strategy is taken in April 2024. The accepted practice for urban heat mapping is in summer, in midsummer, because that shows you the extremes. The urban heat mapping that is in the strategy shows a maximum temperature of 37 degrees. The urban heat mapping that the city did in 2020 in December showed a maximum temperature of 57 degrees. And I have no doubt that those maximums are rising. We know it's got hotter. We know we've lost tree canopy. We know there's more concrete. There's more bitumen. So, yeah, I don't think the heat mapping in the strategy reflects what we're actually faced with. And that is an urgent, it should be on the priority list, and we should be looking at where those hotspots are within the city. But there's no analysis of that in the strategy.
Thank you. And one final question. It's with regard to the removal of the 6 trees. So tonight you would have heard for the first time there is a late amendment to that motion to include approximately 135 square metres of low-level vegetation, and then also additional funding requests for $30,000 to undertake that, and also the removal of the 6 trees. And we've also heard a late 11th hour amendment as well with regard to what that might look like. So on the south side of Lake Douglas, it might look something like the Hurlingham Living Stream. Did you have any comments with regard to that? I know you haven't prepared for it and you've only been made aware of it, but do you have any comments with regard to that proposal?
Well, I mean, my greatest concern is trees and tree canopy. Removing the trees is totally inappropriate as I'm concerned, as far as I'm concerned. And if you're going to put in low-level planting, yes, that I totally support that. I totally support low-level planting, but we need trees and low-level planting. I am assuming that the $30,000 will have to come from somewhere else in the budget. I'm assuming that the city administration have determined where they would have been undertaking low-level planting. Hurlingham live stream is one of those locations. I'm assuming there's other locations, so it would need a change in priorities for the city administration when they've obviously worked out where the areas, well, I assume they've worked out where the areas of greatest need are, and this one wasn't on a drawing board at this stage. So it seems a very odd change to the notice of motion to me.
Thank you, Ms Lees.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Lees. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Navard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm just asking this because I know you're quite knowledgeable and it's not directly something you mentioned, but I just was wondering, do you know if there are any hard surface measurement things, you know, particularly we know and we can see that like the ground hard surface areas and clearly they're heat emitters, but I was also wondering about the vertical ones because once again it's reflecting heat, and I just wondered, well, if we're looking at foliage, is anyone looking at the other kind of consequence? That's all.
Yeah, I mean, different surfaces emit different levels of heat. Even bare sand emits a lot of heat, and you will find that a lot of the bare development sites across the city are some of the hottest spots across the city. Any canopy, any foliage reduces the heat. You'll see on grass it's much cooler than being on bitumen. So yeah, any green cover improves or reduces the heat level, but trees bring so many more benefits than that. And trees, through their transpiration, bring much more cooling than grass and any of those other surfaces. So, yeah, there's room for all of it, basically, and we are going to have to be looking at this very seriously as our summers continue to get hotter and the urban heat island effect increases.
Any further questions, councillors? No. Thank you very much, Ms Lees.
Can I just say, in response to Councillor Brandis's question about the data, if you go on the urban tree canopy data dashboard, you can look suburb by suburb, you can break it down. So there is data for each suburb and what the canopy cover in those suburbs is. So I mean, that's one thing that I'm disappointed at, that the strategy hasn't looked at the canopy cover by suburb. Even the previous urban forest strategy did that. So we've gone backwards as far as I can see in terms of local context.
Thank you, Ms Lees. I'd now like to invite Mr Stephen Russell of Como, who is speaking for the officer recommendation at item 10.3.4 and speaking against the notice of recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome, Mr Russell. I look forward to your deputation.
Thank you and good evening. Because I'm limited in time, I'm just going to speak to item 12.1 first. So I was originally intending to put forward a deputation for the draft urban greening strategy, but wondered what would be the point when this council may undermine the intent of greening the city by raising and supporting notices of motion which effectively urban degreen the city by restricting tree location. The first example being 10.3.5, reported at last month's council meeting, which incidentally cost the ratepayer $25,000. And we now have this notice of motion, which if passed, would likely, per the officer's report, incur further costs to the ratepayer. Hence, this council needs to stop micromanaging city operations by raising and approving these types of motions, which consequently cost the ratepayers money, and also not allowing for the optimum planting of trees on public property. This is not good government, and indeed can be seen to be out of alignment with the general function of local government as described in the Act. And public property this is. Councillor Coveney has previously talked about the virtues of private property rights which have been rightly owned, and notes no one owns a view from private property. Yet the ultimate objective or consequence of this notice of motion is to protect views from private properties by placing restrictions on public property. In effect, this notice of motion covertly extends private property rights over public property without any form of compensation to the public. Council need to be reminded that public lands are exactly that, public, which must be used for the betterment of the community, not a few, and certainly not without meaningful compensation. And to this point, feedback from the urban greening strategy notes that trees on the foreshore is a want from the community in both absolute and data distribution terms. I refer Council to the histogram under section 3.4, foreshore planning, in the feedback. With regard to the community amenity value, Councillor Coveney states, there is no obvious amenity benefit to the wider community for these trees being planted in this particular location. Councillor Coveney is incorrect in his statement, as he simply ignores the environmental benefits of trees to our fauna and therefore to our community regardless of where a tree is located. A bird feeding, roosting or nesting does not care where a tree is located. Crikey. Because of the lack of trees in South Perth, it is just thankful there is actually going to be an additional tree on the foreshore. Without trees, the diversity of fauna on the foreshore will be limited, and that is simply out of alignment with the foreshore management plan for Node 7, which requires the enhancement and encouragement of the flora, fauna of the lakes. Councillor Coveney's notice of motion is out of step with a plan that has community-wide buy-in. With regard to the city skyline, Councillor Coveney, in his reasons, has compared the city skyline to the Mona Lisa. And I quote, "In the same way you wouldn't cover up the Mona Lisa for all to enjoy, we ought not to cover up the view of the Perth CBD skyline for all to enjoy." Firstly, these 6 trees, nor any future trees on the foreshore, are intending to cover up the skyline for all to enjoy. Councillor Coveney is incorrect in this respect. And secondly, making a comparison to the Mona Lisa is simply ridiculous. The Mona Lisa is a French national treasure and probably one of the most recognisable man-made images in human history. The city skyline is not a worthy comparison. May well the Mona Lisa be enigmatically smiling at Councillor Coveney's comparison, because I doubt even the great Leonardo da Vinci could paint Mona Lisa doing a massive eye roll. I ask Councillor Coveney to keep his reasons in perspective. The city skyline view is important for the general public, tourists and alike, using the foreshore, and therefore this is the very reason these trees are set back from the most intensive used areas of the foreshore. The city has got it right in terms of these tree locations to maintain views for the public. To conclude, Councillor Coveney has noted that protecting significant views was an election platform, and that's fair enough. However, many elected members here did not, and I wish therefore to remind Council that under the Act, elected members are to represent the interests of the electors, ratepayers and residents of the district, and take account of the interests of other persons who work in or visit the district. To me, this means the general community first and foremost when it comes to items of a public interest, not a few individual property owners, and therefore Council need to reflect on this when casting their vote. Okay, the asset management strategy, a bit drier. I speak for the asset management strategy, as this type of strategy and the asset class management plans that hang from it will hopefully provide a framework where objectives are reached via agnostic decision-making driven by reliable data and risk assessment. This is one of the best methods to achieve long-term value for the operating budget for the ratepayer, whilst ensuring the city assets still function, the environment protected, and the public safety ensured. That being said, I do note the following with regard to data and risk. 1. There are elements of the asset management maturity assessment that are below competency to which the city intends to address by having all elements meeting competency via an asset management improvement plan. I'm unsure of the target schedule for such, but it seems the city are not aspiring to be at least optimising maturity by 2035. This is unfortunate, as this does not fully leverage the benefits of asset management. The question, therefore, is why Council is not aspiring to have best practice capabilities within the decade. Why is Council being so meek in this regard? If it's the case that implementation to a high maturity will require additional operational investment, then have that frank discussion with the community by showing the community a more aspiring business plan. As a minimum, As confidence in the accuracy or reliability of data drives informed decision-making, then surely at least the maturity elements associated with such, which should be targeted to be best practice. 2, not all assets are of equal priority or criticality to the city if they were to unfortunately functionally fail or a level of service not achieved. To put this into a pragmatic example, given a budget and accepting failure will occur and how best to manage this failure, is it more or less acceptable for a road to not allow for safe driving compared to some mobile equipment not being operative? In an assessment management framework, this is a reasonable question to be asked and assessed. I believe this is why the infrastructure performance indicators given in the 2024 National State of Assets report is a function of asset risk profile. As a city has a risk framework that allows for this comparison and assessment to be made, then so it goes for all assets to be risk assessed against failure or level of service degradation, and therefore their criticality ranked. This is not to say this is the only decision point where to focus resources, but it provides context against other indicators, for example, the percentage asset health, where budgets are best prioritised. To this point, I note that percentage asset health for stormwater drainage and pathways are 49% and 68% respectively, yet the framework to support future decisions and achieve desired outcomes is heavily weighed in favour of pathways. This seems contrary to objective decision-making, noting pathways has a more positive health indicator compared to drainage. Hence, I assume the methodology is based upon other factors other than percentage asset health. Unfortunately, the plan is silent in this regard. I put it to the council that if risk assessed, failure of stormwater drainage may be far more consequential than pathway failure, and therefore, when coupled with percentage asset health, it seems illogical to place pathways
60 seconds remaining, Mr. Russell.
over stormwater drainage over the term of the plan. It is unclear, therefore, why the methodology behind the asset management strategy results in this prioritisation, particularly so when noting the future stress points. I fear that stormwater drainage is not getting the attention it deserves. To conclude, the management of local government assets and services is notoriously difficult because, let's be honest and frank, the public's expectations can be very high, even unreasonable at times when considering the restrictions on revenue streams and state grant delivery. Putting aside those challenges, this strategy has the bones to form a working framework to better manage our assets, but only if council were to fully buy into it and allow the process to drive funding decisions.
Thank you for your deputation, Mr. Russell. Councillors, any questions for Mr. Russell this evening? No. Thank you for your deputation. I'd now like to invite Ms. Calagera Terabel, I hope I've pronounced that right, of South Perth, who is speaking for the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Do we have Ms. Terabel here? There you are. And do let me know if I've mispronounced your surname there. Welcome to you. We look forward to your deputation.
Thank you. Good evening, elected members and City Administration. Thank you for the opportunity to present my deputation in support of Councillor Coveney's motion to Council. I recently purchased a property on Jubilee Street. I paid a premium price based on the location, including the iconic views of the city, the city skyline, as most residents along my street have previously done before me. I believe our properties have some of the highest GRV values in the district, and consequently, we also pay some of the highest council rates in the district. In the short time I've been living here, around 12 months, there has been a proliferation of unexpected planting activity on the parkland directly in front of my residence, which I've come to learn are not just low-lying vegetation such as shrubs and reeds for the lakes, but trees including but not limited to very tall, fast-growing, potentially up to 100 metres in height. This clearly will not only interrupt and block my iconic views that I've paid a premium for, but in the long term also devalue my property investment. I would like to make it clear that I love the and what is already there, and support low-level planting to preserve natural habitat. It's just a matter of balance. That's it.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Councillors, do we have any questions for Ms Terrible this evening? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Terraville, for your deputation. With regard to the 6 trees that have been proposed for removal in Councillor Coveney's Councillor Coveney's motion, are they directly in front of your property?
Some of them are, yes.
How many of those are?
Probably about 4.
4. And are there large trees behind those juvenile trees currently in place? Or?
There are large trees on the other side of the lake. They're not large at the moment, but they will be in a couple of years' time.
Okay, thank you. And for the ones that are proposed to be removed, do you have a preference as to where these could be relocated?
They are actually quite small at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they could be probably relocated closer to where the sand is. In our area, there are turtles in Lake Douglas, and the birds attack the turtles when they're crossing to go and lay their eggs. So having lower shrubs so that they could get across would be much preferable to having trees where the birds can swoop down and attack them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Ms Terraville. Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. I'd now like to invite Mr Luke Terry of South Perth, who is speaking for the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome to you, Mr Terry and Mr Terry. We look forward to your deputation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Thank you for hearing my deputation on this item in support of Councillor Coveney's notice of motion. On behalf of my family, I would like to thank Councillor Coveney for his time in meeting concerned local residents and for his work in tabling this motion for this evening. First and foremost, we agree that our parklands need trees, but it is the placement of these trees that is the heart of this issue here, not the trees themselves. Plainly stated, the views of Perth City from a South Perth perspective are far from ordinary. As Councillor Choi stated in the Ordinary Council meeting on the 25th of March this year, views across the river towards the city are unique and iconic, and I would like to remind this chamber that Google uses an image of Perth City taken from the South Perth foreshore to showcase Perth as both a tourist hub on Google Maps and Google Web. As you all will be aware, the Honourable Rita Saffioti, the Tourism Minister for Western Australia, recently launched a campaign to promote WA tourism right from the South Perth foreshore, with the venerated views dominating both the news cameras as well as images from the campaign. There can be no question on the significance of our views. This council recently endorsed a new significant view policy, which is currently undergoing public advertising. And this highlights the analysis of access to views from specific rooms, their impacts on residential amenity, and the retention of views of significance. whilst we acknowledge that this policy addresses private development on adjoining properties, we believe that several key principles are transferable and applicable to this matter. While properties along Mill Point Road and the South Perth Esplanade often benefit from elevated topography or high-rise constructions, dwellings along Jubilee Street are predominantly single homes situated at ground level. As such, the amenity provided by views from primary living areas in these homes is particularly vulnerable to obstruction. Any new development along the rear boundary, including structures such as dense grouping of trees, which some people call bosque, has the potential to significantly diminish, if not altogether compromise, these ground level views. This is especially the case the closer the trees are to property boundaries. It follows then that it should come as no surprise that with reduced amenity arises the potential for associated reduced property values. Do we have Exhibit C on the television?
Governance, we able to arrange that?
Okay, cool. You can get the gist of what the letter says from the header. This email is written by Lee Riddell of Mont Property, and he's a real estate agent with significant knowledge of properties in our area. In this letter, Mr. Riddell states that views are not simply a desirable feature, they are a tangible asset that contributes directly to a property's market value. And he also believes that if vistas of Perth City from the residences of Jubilee Street were compromised due to developments and or structural changes, there would be a significant and measurable decline in the market value of affected properties, as well as broader implications for the local property market. Under the Local Government Act of 1995, the term development is defined broadly to encompass a range of activities, such as the maintenance or management of land, and this includes the planting of trees. Accordingly, just as private development is subject to careful assessment against the relevant legislation and policies, Council must also ensure that long-term planning and development of its own land, including tree plantings, considers the full range of potential impacts against its own objectives. As I believe Councillor Coveney has already stated, we need a balanced approach to tree plantings across our district. In the council meeting on the 25th of March this year, Councillor Waugh remarked that the question of maintaining views is determined on an objective basis. As demonstrated, do we have Appendix A and B? Could that be provided? Yeah. So that photo there was taken in 2011. And that's 2025. So there's a significant increase in the number of trees and it's blocked the view. This appears not to be the case. A reasonable person is likely to objectively assess that there has been a substantial increase in the number of tree plantings along the South Perth foreshore, including the parkland behind Jubilee Street. Councillor Waugh additionally stated, as part of her alternative motion, that the evaluative test that city planners use to guide tree plantings should have a fair, consistent and objective lens. By drawing once again to the comparison of those images, this appears not to be the case in our circumstance. From the images, it is clear that the trees are being planted randomly and without much thought, with a significant increase in the amount of trees present. These actions do not appear to be in line with the South Perth Foreshore Management Plan of 2015, which is predicated by the residents of South Perth and clearly highlights in nodes 1, 3 and 8 that the primary consideration of the plan is to maintain Perth city vistas and to consider the obstruction and retention of such views. These same principles should apply to Node 7, the area that encompasses or is situated directly behind the residents of Jubilee Street. No plan for the planting of trees has been provided to affected residents by the South Perth Council or the Parks and Reserves Department, and this is placing uncertainty onto concerned residents. As demonstrated in the images that everyone can see on their screens, in our view, certainty, clarity and consistency has not been established nor apparently maintained by the South Perth Council. I respectfully remind this chamber that you have supported residents on the South Perth Esplanade in respect to their views and residents from other areas such as Waterford and Karrawara on the matter of tree plantings. All we are seeking is the same consideration and consistency in decision making across our district. Thank you for your time and attention on this important matter.
Thank you for your deputation, Mr Terry. Councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for your deputation, Mr Terry. With regard to the 6 juvenile trees that are planned for removal under Councillor Coveney's motion, how many of those are directly in front of your property at 22 Jubilee Street?
There's one that that's in front of us. A lot, yeah. It's a small gum tree, but as you can see from the images, there's a lot more towards the other properties. But we are less affected than other residents. Yeah.
Thank you. And with that one tree that's directly in front of your property, are there trees behind it that would also be currently impacting your view? So when this juvenile tree grows, would it not be, I suppose, in the shadow of those trees effectively?
There are, and especially across Lake Douglas. But yeah, if this tree remains and still grows, it could have a devastating impact.
Okay, thank you. Just a final question, and you spoke about a balanced approach, and I think that's fair and reasonable. If we look at the South Perth Esplanade, though, and we look at it from Men Street pretty much down to Miller's Pool, right down the other end, we've got low shrubs, we've got rose bushes, and we've got one pine tree. Would it be a balanced approach to provide any more vegetation for greening and managing the urban heat effect? Would balanced look like providing more trees in that location?
Well, yes. If you walk down the Esplanade near Men Street or near Elm Street, there is not much shelter and shade there, as many people will know. In our area, there is a significant amount of trees already there and across Lake Douglas. So, as you said, a balanced approach. This means spreading this. If it's going to affect us, it should affect everyone in this position. So balance has not been achieved, and if people are fighting for urban greening practices and that, this should be dispersed across the district, and it's quite unfair, and it's not helping at all. Yeah.
Thank you. And just a final question. So again, you weren't privy to the amendments, the late amendments to Councillor Coveney's motion, and I mentioned earlier that it included about 135 square metres of additional low-level vegetation and a $30,000 budget adjustment for removing plants and planting plants, and another subsequent amendment which it would look something like the living stream at Hurlingham. What are your thoughts with regard to that for the removal of the one tree in front of your property?
Well, this year already, as some of you might know, that there's been hundreds of shrubs installed recently. So they've torn up grass and they've put hundreds of these shrubs that are soon to grow. And I think that's beneficial. But if they're planning for any more of this, I think that would be even more devastating to the the use of that area people use it for sport, recreation. They walk their dogs there. So I think that would be more devastating. And if this proposed shrubbery and 100 and something square metres should be dispersed along our foreshore.
Yeah, last month there was some community planting in front of our house. So there were several hundreds of low-lying shrubs all planted. Would be at least 80 or 90 square metres of land that's already been planted with shrubs 3 to 4 weeks ago. So I think we've had our fair share of quite a lot of shrubs being planted in front of Jubilee residents.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. Appreciate it.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Navard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering about your comment about planting randomly and with not much thought. And could you elaborate on that, please?
Well, as residents, we really haven't been given a tree planting document or anything. If you walk along the footpath in the middle of the grass, it seems that it's just dotted randomly. There's no organisation to it, and I actually think that's quite devastating for the appeal of the area. It's a beautiful piece of parkland, and this unruly tree planting it's not appealing. It just dotted randomly. Yeah.
Could I also ask about your comment about notifying local residents about any greening projects in your area? Could you elaborate on how you think that might have a positive outcome?
Well, I know of people on Hurlingham Road who've been notified when trees are going to be installed and if views are going to be obstructed or not. So I think a bit of a heads up would be helpful for all of the residents, and it would ease concern, and just to show that things are actually being done properly, because for residents, we do not see that this has been planned for. When the gardeners have come in the past to place shrubbery or trees, we ask them and they seem to have no idea what they're doing. So as a resident, that's quite concerning. And as people who live there, that's concerning for the future as well. Yeah, that's okay.
Any further questions, councillors? No. Thank you for the deputation. I'd now like to invite Mrs. Lou Di Viglio. I hope I've pronounced that right. Oh, Mr. My apologies. Who is speaking speaking against the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your deputation.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Good evening, councillors. Just to correct the situation, I think it's incorrect. I'm speaking in for the motion.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, I am a resident on Jubilee Street, South Perth, and have been there since 2004. I represent myself and my neighbours at Jubilee Street, South Perth. Some 8 months ago, 7 trees were planted by the city between the rear of our properties and Lake Douglas. This area is all used by our children, family, and to either kick a ball, play cricket, or other games. This has now been compromised. In addition, our views of the city, river, lake is also compromised. From our lower ground level floor, we cannot see Lake Douglas waterline. It has been screened by trees planted. The additional 7 trees planted will add additional screening and affect our views of the lake, river and city. Our properties adjoin the city's property, and we have not been provided any respect, courtesy and communication prior to any works performed by the city, hence our disappointment. There currently is 20 trees that were planted on the northern side of Lake Douglas, which can grow 10 to 15 metres in height. This has created a fence-like appearance around the edge of the lake and was created completely by man. As per Council's policy 350.09, significant views, we confirm that our views have been compromised of the city, river and lake, and it will be worse once these trees are developed. We've actually provided some photos for this evening. I don't know whether they've been distributed or whether they're on the screen, but if possible, I would like to introduce them as before photos, before the trees were there, and after photos. And hopefully by that, you can see how all this is transformed. This particular photo was taken on my neighbour's home in 2012, repairing a piece of glass on his fence. And I think hopefully the next photo will show you the trees and how you can see the little glimpse of the lake, which is on the left side. That's all we can see from our properties at this point. Questions to Council. Why plant these trees between our homes and Lake Douglas when there is clearly other locations that have no trees? Question 2. Node 7 is acknowledged by all residences and a strategy is documented to enhance and encourage the flora and fauna and does not promote large trees. Therefore, why are trees planted in this designated area if they are only suggested? Question 3. How can we achieve our views of the lake, Swan River and city in its original state? In summary, we request Council to respectfully rectify this issue as stated. 1. Remove and relocate 7 trees that were planted between our properties and Lake Douglas. 2. Remove 7 existing trees that were planted on the rim of the lake on the northern side of the lake. 3. Remove and make good, as per photos of 2012, which is a clear demonstration of what was a natural environment for the habitat and not man-made, such that we can enhance the lake and not fence it with landscaping. And 4, respectfully, we confirm for the record that our objection is only for the new trees that have been installed recently and not for the trees that have been long established. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Councillors, do we have any questions this evening? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Di Virgilio. Just with regard to your request then, I heard you mentioned the proposal to remove 7 trees plus another 7 trees. Is that right? You're wanting
7 trees in total.
Oh, 7 trees
on the
total.
opposite side of the lake.
And so that's 7 trees on the opposite side of the lake. That doesn't include the 6 trees on the south side, is that correct?
Correct.
So you're asking for 13 trees to be removed?
Correct.
Yep. And have you had a conversation with Councillor Coveney about the additional 7 trees?
On the visit and the meeting that we had, yes, I did.
You have? Okay. And was he amenable to the 7 or not? Because I've seen one amendment to his motion and we've had a late amendment and I'm not sure if there's another one coming.
It was briefly discussed and we brought it to his attention on the fact that in a few years' time, these trees will grow substantially higher. Every year we see them growing taller and taller, and our views are being affected.
Okay. And was Councillor Coveney amenable to amending it for the additional 7 trees on the other side of the lake?
We briefly discussed it, but we went with the option of the 6 trees that are currently being planted.
Thank you. With regard to the 6 trees, how many of those are directly in front of your property?
4.
4. And again, behind those trees, behind the lake on the other side, there's obviously a tree line that's already there?
Correct.
Yep. Would those 4 have any additional impact, do you believe, or would they be effectively in the same shadow outline of the existing mature trees when they mature?
Okay, so at ground level at the moment where we live, those trees at the lake on the southern side, once grown, they will affect that view. On the second and third level, it's only time as trees grow, we will affect our view.
Yeah.
It's just time.
Okay, thank you. We heard a separate deputation this evening from Ms. Terribli, and she indicated, of course, the turtles in the lake needed some sort of level of vegetation. Did you have any views on this, or have you seen turtles, and are you aware of the wildlife around the lake?
I have seen turtles, not as much as I would have expected. I have seen wildlife. I have seen more wildlife in the earlier days when I moved in 2004 compared to what I see today. Whether it's got to do with the height of the trees, whether the birds can fly in at the right angle, I'm not sure. But I have seen particularly black swans come through in the earlier days, but you don't see much of them now. So I have seen some differences. You still get the odd ducks coming through, but not as much as they were before.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Virgilio.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Navard.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering about areas of winter water and whether winter water spreads across the rear of the properties in that area. Is that the case?
I'm not sure what the question is, rear water. What do you mean?
No, winter water.
Oh, winter water.
water spreading
Right.
out across the park in some areas.
Yes, I have seen that, yes, in some areas.
In some areas.
In some areas.
And are those areas along Jubilee Terrace?
At the rear, in some cases, but more towards, how could I say that? More towards the other lake on the right side, which is part of Lake Douglas. I've seen a lot more there than what I have seen directly in front of us.
Do you think that trees would be of assistance in managing that winter water?
I'm not sure. It depends on the species of tree, I think. I couldn't answer that.
Thanks.
Any further questions, councillors? No. Thank you very much for the deputation. Okay, that brings us to item 10, which is the draft July reports. I'll now hand you over to the Acting Chief Executive Officer, Mr Matthew Scott, to take you through the balance of the draft July reports.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First item is item 10.1.1, RFT 1 of 2025, provision of Coode Street, new public toilets and changing places building. This report considers the submissions received from the advertising of tender 1 of 2025 for the provision of Coode Street, new public toilets and changing places building. This report will outline the assessment process used during the evaluation of the tenders received and recommend approval of the tender that provides the best value for money and level of service to the city. The report also requests an approval of a budget variation to provide sufficient funds to complete the project.
Thank you, Mr Scott. Councillors, any questions on this item, bearing in mind that there is a confidential attachment? Councillor Navard.
I'm happy to accept my question. I noticed just within the process that there was a weighting of 25% on time frame. Is that going to be an okay thing to ask about?
It's in the open report, so I can hand pass that one to Ms Amprema.
Okay, well, I could just elaborate then on my question. So it's not unusual for building projects in general to not meet their proposed timeframes as supplied in tender responses. And so to what extent to some extent, a tenderer who offers a tempered forecast of their completion date may be disadvantaged in comparison with a competing tenderer who may offer a much more ambitious completion date. And I really just wondered, therefore, how does the city go about addressing that in the general tender process?
Ms Ampremo, is that one you can answer in open session?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I can answer that one. The weighting for different criteria is and has to be fully disclosed at the start of the tender process, so that respondents are aware that this criteria will be assessed and what weight will be placed on it. The programme submitted is reviewed by the evaluation panel, and when there is concerns with the content of what has been submitted, the panel may seek clarification. So the panel does look at it and has to be satisfied that what has been presented in the submission is realistic. And they will ask for further information if they have any concerns about what's been supplied.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Any further questions on this item, councillors? No. Next item, please, Mr Scott.
Item 10.3.1, Urban Greening Strategy. This report requests that Council adopts the Urban Greening Strategy as contained in Attachment E. This follows an extensive stakeholder engagement process. The Urban Greening Strategy will replace the Urban Forest Strategy 2018 to 2023 and the City of South Perth Green Plan 2002.
Thank you, Mr Scott. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got quite a few questions, and quite a few of these actually follow from deputations this evening. So I'm happy for someone to ask questions in between my long list. Tonight we actually heard about the line of sight being obscured with regard to the trees that are being planted, in particular on the foreshore. Can I just ask to what extent the urban greening strategy is going to be taking into consideration views? Do we actually have, I suppose, a plan that may address more issues for the community?
Ms Ampremo, should I send that in your direction?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So we acknowledge that this is a very complex issue, and we did seek to get feedback through the stakeholder consultation process. If you recall, way back in stage 1 of the stakeholder engagement, we did ask a question specifically relating to the foreshores and balancing views. 72% preferred maximising urban greening on foreshores over preserving views, showing the prioritisation of environmental impact over aesthetics. When it came to stage 2, which was the deliberative panel, the threshold for getting something into the strategy as a priority through the deliberative panel was 80%. And we never reached that, that percentage with the issue relating to views versus planting. However, we do know that there is a very strong support within the community to prioritise planting over views. And the wording, if you just give me one moment, the wording in the draft strategy talks about creating, it talks about creating effectively sort of vistas. Sort of silhouetting views. I can get you the exact page number after the meeting if you like, but it talks about that, and that was the wording that the panel came up with that was as balanced that they could agree on as possible, but bearing in mind that we were trying to reach an 80% consensus for anything to get into the strategy document.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Just another question. This evening, the deputation from Ms Lees noted that results of feedback have not been provided. Is that something that we would consider doing?
Ms Ampremo?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So if I can just, what was done with the community feedback is a significant amount related to the way we had used the language in the document, and perhaps the wording wasn't strong enough. So we went back through the document and made those changes. I do acknowledge that we could have perhaps been clearer in communicating how we had made the changes from the community feedback. And probably the other significant aspect is we did receive feedback that related to things that would be contained in the implementation plan and not the strategy itself. But I do acknowledge that we could actually be clearer about what we did with that feedback, but we certainly did take it on board, and where it was appropriate, we did modify the document.
Great. Thank you, Ms Amprimo. We heard a couple deputations this evening and they spoke about lack of clarity and obviously directly referring to targets. What is the position with regard to targets for a long-term view as opposed to an annual short-term program?
Ms Amprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So one of the challenges with targets, and that was evident in the urban forest strategy, was there was targets put in place without a clear understanding of what action needed to happen to reach those targets. And we're very mindful of not producing a strategic document that we would then be trying to report on where we simply were not achieving that because we didn't have a clear pathway to get there. With the implementation plan, we will look at specific actions that we can identify that will support the overall intent of the strategy. And also, I think one thing that's really important to note is that when we started out on this journey, we did believe that the state Perth and Peel urban greening strategy would be available whilst we were developing this. That's still under development at the moment, and I would envisage that we would need to certainly take that into account with the implementation plan, but there may be an opportunity for us to relook at the strategy when we've got some more indication of how that is going to impact what we do as a local government.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Just with regard to strategy though, this is actually a long-term view. So does it mean to say that we are not going to have a long-term set of targets or goals with regard to numbers of trees, the tree canopy percentage cover or reduction in heat across the city? So I would be considering that a strategy with a long-term view would actually have some targets and goals, notwithstanding we may not meet them or we may even exceed them. Is there no intent for a long-term set of targets?
Ms Amprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So we worked through the process to put in measures within the document where we believed we could measure them. We haven't seen anything. We looked around other strategies that were in other places, but we haven't seen anything that is effectively operating where that has been easy to do. So we can put a percentage canopy target in there, but we don't have a full understanding of what we would need to do to achieve that. And the disconnect between when you plant a tree and when you achieve an increase in canopy means that would be a long time into the future. So in the first 10 years from planting a tree, there's quite a small amount of impact on canopy, and that's one of the challenges we've got.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. And I realise if we do set targets, we may not meet them, but we would be able to explain that. So maybe the explanation may be the fact that we've had severe summers and we've had a loss of trees, or we've maybe lost canopy cover on private property and city property has had to pick up that shortfall. So with that in mind, do you not think that maybe this strategy needs a bit more time and it needs to be fine-tuned? So as tonight, we've heard with regard to feedback, we've heard with regard to a shortage of targets, tangible targets. Do we need more time to actually reconsider this? an extensive amount of work has been undertaken, and I appreciate that, and a lot of effort, and there's a couple of hundred pages in the report, but do we need to do more?
Ms Amprima?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm confident that the process that we went through and what we did with engaging the community and working with them to come up with what is in the document was a robust process. The conversation around targets came up multiple times, and there was never a solution through that process that was really agreed on. So the biggest one is around percentage canopy cover. That is what a lot of people think that there should be in the document. And I don't disagree that we should be aiming to improve our canopy, and whether that's to achieve 30% by a particular year or whatever that is. But we don't understand how many trees we need to plant and at what time to achieve that. So we could spend a lot of resources on working that out, and you can't just say a tree is a tree and that gives you so much canopy. Depends on the species, depends on the location. So there's either it's a very rough calculation, or if you want to do it in any meaningful way, you could spend a lot of effort doing that instead of actually putting those resources into improving the canopy by planting trees on the ground. You also then would have to work out how many trees you're going to lose as well. So you've got to get both sides of the equation in that calculation. I'm not averse to targets, but what I do have an issue with is us spending a lot of time putting things in to calculate how we can achieve those targets and diverting valuable resources from actually changing what the strategy is trying to achieve. And I say this from the perspective of I have had to report on various different documents throughout my career where people have well-intentioned put targets and measures in a document and then have to go in and spend a lot of resources on working out how we monitor those measures, and not doing what the actual document set out to achieve. So I think it's about trying to get resources in there. And I think the way that technology is going, measuring our canopy and measuring what type of trees are growing in what way, and getting more data on that. And I think the technology will help us make it more cost effective to do that. And I think our obligation as the city is to keep monitoring that and make sure that we can take the opportunity when it's there to do it in a cost effective way.
Thank you, Ms Amprima, and thank you, Mr Mayor. With regard to targets though, it doesn't just need to be tree canopy cover. So there are a heap of other indicators that could be included with regard to setting some long-term targets. They could include varieties of trees, varieties of trees that provide habitat, varieties of trees that are actually more sustainable in a heating, drier climate. So I don't necessarily see some of those other possible targets as being things that we need to spend a lot of time doing.
I've got to jump in here at this point. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, I understand the point you're trying to make, but council agenda briefings are for questions, not for debate or pseudo-debate.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'm clarifying to provide context to my question.
Perhaps if you can just jump to the question, I do have to be fair to everyone.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've provided context. So the question is, there are a lot of other targets that we could be using. Why aren't we looking at any of those other targets which might be easier to actually implement as opposed to a tree canopy cover?
Thank you. Ms Amprima?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So there are a number of measures included in the document that relate to exactly what you're talking about in terms of diversity of species and species that are appropriate for the changing environment that we're operating in. I guess some of that isn't specific because we can't anticipate what might come up. So nobody anticipated polyphagous shot-hole borer, for example. But we do have measures that are linked to non-canopy percentage in there.
Thank you, Ms Amprima.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo, and thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, Councillor Navard.
Thank you. I only have one question. One of the things that I was thinking about as the questions were going forward was to do with the fact that we're focusing on foliage when in fact the densification targets and the hard surface urban increase is impacting the measures probably more intensively than the mitigating efforts of the foliage. And so I was just wondering about densification targets, and are they used in local government anywhere, and might that be a helpful way to see how things are changing for us? Because it's not just the foliage, it will be also to do with things like the sorts of services we might choose to use where there's discretion, or it could be ways of measuring tall building impacts, not just footprint. So I'm just wondering. Thanks.
I might get you just to restate the question there so that we all know which question's being answered.
Densification yes. Densification plans and hard surface urban measurement techniques and targets, or outcomes, I suppose. Yeah.
Ms Amprimo?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the urban greening strategy really only addresses the greening aspects on public land. However, I suppose in the process of collecting data for the urban greening strategy, we do have some observations about different surfaces and the impact that they have on heat that we can use elsewhere in the city's operations. The urban greening strategy, though, doesn't address densification and private land, so that isn't something that we considered through that process.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This evening we heard a deputation from Ms David, and she noted that the funding for the urban greening was considered a priority, but in the strategy it's only given consideration. Can a comment be provided as to the discrepancy between what was identified as a real priority to actually make sure that we fund the urban greening strategy going forward versus it only being considered?
Ms Amprimo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could the councillor perhaps direct me to the part of the strategy he's referencing?
I can only direct you to the deputation that was made tonight by Ms David. So she noted that the number one point was the funding for the urban greening was actually considered a priority, but in the strategy it's only given consideration. I'm wondering, is that because we don't have a long-term strategy and on an annual basis we may very well come up with a plan to plant or to maintain the canopy cover? Is that the reason?
I might need to take that on notice, but I think what has been referred to is two different pieces of information because the wording was what came out of the panel discussion. But I can have a look into that and get back to you.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Any further questions, councillors? No. Okay. Moving on to the next item, please. Mr Scott.
Item 10.3.2, E-Quote 07 of 2025, provision of traffic management services. This report considers submissions received from the advertising of E-Quote 07 of 2025 for the provision of traffic management services. This report will outline the assessment process during evaluation of the E-Quotes received and recommend approval of the submission that provides the best value for money and level of service for the city.
Thank you, Mr Scott. Any questions on this item, councillors, bearing in mind that there is a confidential attachment? I'm going to take that as a no. Next item, please, Mr Scott.
Item 10.4.1, listing of payments for June 2025. This report presents to Council a list of accounts paid under delegated authority between the 1st of June 2025 and the 30th of June 2025 for information. It also includes purchase card transactions between 1st of May 2025 and the 31st of May 2025 in line with the new legislative requirements.
Thank you, Mr Scott. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Navard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just was wondering about the listing of payments, 10.4.1, and referring to page 192. And there was an item there relating to the Kwinana Energy Recovery Waste Disposal, a bill in May for $238,618, and I just wondered if we could know where that cost is in the like the Kwinana Energy Recovery Plan that we signed up to, that's all. If someone could just elaborate a little bit. If we're paying out this amount of money, how are we going towards, as I recall, it was to do with us never having quite sufficient rubbish because we were a bit of a smaller metropolitan area, and so I just was wondering how that was going.
And just to clarify, Councillor Navard, you're referring to what is the third entry line when it begins on page 192 of the attachments?
That's correct. I did actually send the question through,
All right.
but it was late this afternoon, I'm sorry.
Mr Lecoq, can I send that in your direction?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The question is not so much a payments question, however, and thank you to Councillor Navard sending the question through in advance. I will defer the question to Director Amprimo, who can discuss the essence of your question.
Ms Amprimo?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So I believe the question's asking around are we achieving our committed tonnages that have been committed through that contract, and the city's currently delivering waste as per the contract, and currently we're not concerned about our ability to meet the contractual commitments there.
Any further questions, councillors? No. Next item, please, Mr Scott.
Item 10.4.2, monthly financial statements for June 2025, in brackets interim. The monthly financial statements are provided within attachments A to I, with high-level analysis contained in the comments of this report.
Thank you, Mr Scott. Any questions on this item, councillors? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The full year revenue from the mini golf course is down around 20%. I'm just wondering, is that an indication that mini golf at the golf park is in decline, or if we've got any other strategies that might increase that revenue stream? I'm just mindful that it's been operating, I think, for about 4 years now.
Should I send that one too, folks? Mr Lecoq?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Brenda Brandis, we are in ongoing consultation with the operator, and what they have highlighted as a concern and a hindrance is the ability to attach an effective food and beverage offering, hindered by the lack of facilities, and we are overall trying to address that through the redevelopment. Yeah, we obviously are led to believe that there was this significant interest in the beginning, and then the lack of ability to attract more corporate business and events is becoming a bit of a challenge in the sense that we are hindered by the commercial offering.
Thank you, Mr. Lecoq. And just a follow-up question. So the mini golf has been operating, I think, for about 4 years. Is there going to be a planned capital makeover, in the next 3-4 years to revamp and reinvigorate mini golf at all?
Mr. Lecoq?
Through the Chair. At this point in time, no significant degradation of the facility has been highlighted, and the facility is still in a very good condition. That includes the course as well as the amenities around it. On continuous monitoring will be kept up to speed.
Any further questions on this item, councillors? No? Next item, please, Mr. Scott.
Item 10.4.3, Asset Management Strategy. This report presents the draft Asset Management Strategy 2025 to 2035 for consideration by Council.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any questions, councillors? No. Okay. That brings us to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. We begin with item 12.1, entitled Notice of Motion. Councillor Nick Coveney. Removal of the 6 trees planted on the south side of Lake Douglas during winter 2024. Councillors, Councillor Nick Coveney has advised that he is amending his notice of motion recommendation as found in the agenda. In his absence tonight, I feel anticlimactic because Councillor Brenda Brandis has beaten me to it, but for the sake of completeness, I will read out the amendment in Councillor Coveney's absence. It is available, it is available on the screens in the gallery, including updated reasons. So the amended motion is as follows, that Council requests the CEO to, paragraph 1, remove the 6 juvenile trees planted on the south side of Lake Douglas during winter 2024. Paragraph 2, plant approximately 135 square metres of low-level planting as a comparative replacement for the removed tree canopy cover at maturity on the south side of Lake Douglas. And paragraph 3, include the adjustment of an additional $30,000 expenditure within the operational budget in the mid-year budget review to cover the costs associated with removal of the trees and preparation and planting of the low-level replacement planting. So for the benefit of those listening via YouTube, that's what Councillor Nick Coveney has amended item 12.1 to read at this point in time. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So firstly, with regard to the proposed amendments, the $30,000 for replanting and also planting 135 square metres, has the administration worked through that number, costed that up, and is $30,000 reasonable?
Ms Amprima?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the number is for the replanting is sort of just over 27,000. Our landscape architect did some numbers on that and worked it out, and then there's some money for removal of the trees and rehabilitating the area where the trees have been removed from.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. The proposal in the amendment to plant 135 square metres of low-level vegetation, has the city given that consideration, and also whether it's appropriate and what sort of species would be considered?
Ms Amprima?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the 135 square metres comes from the estimated mature canopy of the 6 trees that will be removed. Bearing in mind that those 6 trees would provide a level of cooling equivalent to that. So that's the mature canopy area of the 6 trees. So that's how the 135 metres squared was arrived at. And in terms of what planting, I believe it's not actually in the recommendation, but the request of the administration was to consider how much the cost would be to plant low vegetation and vegetation up to a maximum of 2 metres, although in reality that type of planting would probably be shrubs probably only up to 1 metre, plus some other low-level ground cover plants.
Thank you, Ms Zamprimo. This evening we heard from Mr Terry, and one of the comments he made was that the planting of those 6 trees was randomly and without thought. Can the administration please provide a comment as to the process that was undertaken for the planting of those trees, and was there method to the planting strategy?
Ms Zamprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. There is comment on the officer report that notes that considerable consideration was given by staff when those trees were planted. They align, as you can see from the photograph that's in the report, to the property boundaries, so that it allows vistas through from those individual properties that are on Jubilee Street. And also that area is significantly wet during winter months. So planting trees there helps manage that area. We can't mow that throughout winter because of the water levels that are there. So there was certainly a considerable amount of thought went into where those trees were planted and the species that are there in terms of the use by the public, the ground conditions there and the adjoining residents.
Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Zamprimo. Was consideration given to the planting of those trees taking into account the existing tree canopy that was on the northern side of Lake Douglas? So therefore these trees might have been considered reasonable given the already existing tree line.
Ms Zamprimo.
Yeah, thank you for Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor. There is certainly a lot of other planting around that area, and the location of the trees does take that into account.
Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Ms Zamprimo. This entire area has had significant consultation with DBCA, and obviously they have got a view as to what they would like to see, in particular at this sort of more eastern end of the Sir James Mitchell Park. Does the planting of these trees align with their view and their strategy as to what they're trying to achieve?
Ms Zamprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So DBCA does have some feedback on this area, but what predominantly influences the city's decision making is the SJMP foreshore strategy and management plan, and what's contained in the document relating to Node 7 specifically, which is this area, and it is identified as a habitat area for planting. So that is the other plantings that were referenced as part of our annual planting programme that took place, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago now. That is consistent with what's in the foreshore management plan as well.
Thank you, Ms Zamprimo. Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Zamprimo. Again this evening we heard from Mr Terry making reference to the trees that were planted on Hurlingham Street. I'm assuming it's the Hurlingham facing the river. But we heard that those residents were actually notified of the tree planting, including comments with regard to obstructed views. Can you confirm if the city did go through a process to actually advise affected residents about the tree planting and affected views as well?
Ms Zamprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So I believe that the resident was making reference to the Hurlingham Living Stream project. That project is, you know, over $900,000 project, nearly $1 million project. A project of that scale, we certainly undertake a high degree of community engagement and communication on that, just as we did with Belgrade Reserve last year. Our annual winter planting programme, where we may be planting, you know, half a dozen trees in one place, we don't go to that level of consultation, because as you can appreciate, the overhead costs in doing such for 1 or 2 trees or half a dozen trees is fairly significant. So we do consultation of that scale when it's a large project, but not with routine winter planting programme.
Councillor Brenda-Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Ms Zamprimo. With regard to the 6 trees, is this the first time the adjacent residents have actually raised concern with those trees? I understand they've been planted for at least a year. So is this the first instance that we've actually had objection?
Ms Zamprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. No, city officers have had a number of conversations with residents in Jubilee Street over the trees. There were 7 trees there, and one of them had been vandalised and would have grown with significant epicormic shoots. So we agreed to remove that based on the fact that it wouldn't have ultimately been a good species and it would have had more impact. And we also confirmed with the residents that the trees would be uplifted as they grew. So the canopy would remain in place, but the lower part of the tree would be brought up. So there would be views underneath those trees. And we had a number of conversations with residents on that.
Thank you, Ms Zamprimo. Councillor Brenda-Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Zamprimo. This evening, we also heard that the proposed 135 square metres worth of tree planting would be, correct me if I'm wrong, but similar to the Hurlingham Living Stream. Could I get some feedback as to whether another living stream for 135 square metres in that location is appropriate? I appreciate the ground's quite waterlogged in winter. So is that appropriate, and is it something that we could do, and is it something that we could do within the $30,000?
Ms Zamprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So it wouldn't necessarily be the exact same species that are in Hurlingham Living Stream. The plants would be selected based on the ground conditions at the location, but it would be low-level planting of that nature. And the other planting that was referenced by in one of the deputations, that it's at the back of the lakes that we did just recently, it would be similar type of planting to that. So they were low-level sedges, some small shrubs, that type of planting. So that's what will be in there. And the cost of that is reflective. You will get around 135 square metres for $30,000.
Thank you, Ms Zamprimo. Councillor Brenda-Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Ms Zamprimo. This is my final question on this item. So this evening, we have a proposal to remove 6 trees for $30,000, and we also had the removal and planting of, I can't remember how many trees, but Insignia Cove that didn't get planted as part of the last program, which cost $25,000, I understand. These notices of motions are somewhat operational. Could the administration please advise to what extent this is actually impacting undertaking your delivery program in a year? Because I would consider this would be a significant disruption and additional consultation with regard to community and elected members.
Ms Zamprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, operationally, we seek to allocate resources as efficiently as we can and use the information that we have available to us to make the best operational decisions. I believe that the officers have done that in both of these occasions, but councillors are entitled to bring notices of motion where they believe it's in the community interest.
Thank you, Ms Zamprimo. Councillors, any further questions on this item? No. Okay. In that case, we move on to item 12.2, which is a notice of motion from Councillor Nick Coveney entitled Transport Advocacy. Councillors, any questions for the administration on this item tonight? Councillor Navard.
Thank you. I was just going through the material relating to transport. Am I correct in understanding that the last measures for inspecting transport in South Perth were 2021? Is that correct?
Ms Amprimo?
The last...
Could I get some clarity on the question? When you say measures...
the last set of formal documentation relating to our transport needs and...
Are you
What was that?
referencing the integrated transport plan? Is that what you're referencing? Yeah, I believe.
Anything after that?
Yeah, I believe that was around the date. The information that was based on would still be fairly relevant, though. The needs probably wouldn't have changed significantly in that time because it did anticipate development.
Any further questions on this item, folks? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So just with regard to this request to the Minister, from the administration's perspective, we have had previous conversations with the state government. Is it appropriate for us to be having the same conversations at this point in time when the government has its own strategy with regard to transport and the population growth?
Ms Amprimo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the South Perth train station is identified as a future train station by the state government. If council wishes to voice its support for that project to be brought forward and progressed, then that's something that council's free to do.
Any further questions, councillors? I guess I might ask one. I notice that the officer report, the comment, refers to the advocacy strategy that we're in the process of developing. Is there any chance that firing off this particular motion in isolation might undermine the effectiveness of the advocacy strategy?
I'll take that question, Mr Mayor. I don't know that it really has a huge impact on it one way or another, to be honest with you. I would expect that council may consider this as something that they think that should be put forward through the advocacy strategy, but until that conversation's had, I suppose we don't know. But I think any negative impact would be fairly minimal.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just the Part B, Roman numeral 3, it talks about investigating Como Jetty as a potential ferry stop. Is Como Jetty a location that had been identified by the state government previously, but maybe wait till a future date? So I'm just sort of wondering why Como Jetty, given there's a lack of parking and the infrastructure requirements would be quite significant there as opposed to somewhere like Richardson Street.
Ms Amprimo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As far as I'm aware, these the two sites there, Como and Coode Street, are not ones that are identified for progressing by the state government at this point in time.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? No. Okay. That brings us to item 15, which is ordinarily where we would close the meeting to the public if there was any reason for us to do so, but there's not, so we won't. That brings us to item 16, which is closure. So before I close tonight's meeting, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation. I declare the meeting closed at 8:38 p.m. Thank you all, and good night.